The first time I saw Sophie Hale, she walked into my garage wearing white. Not the kind you wear to fix cars, the kind that doesn't belong anywhere near Greece. Her car had stalled outside town, and she looked like she'd landed on another planet. I fixed her engine. She thanked me, smiled, and came back the next week. Then again. Said she liked the smell of honest work. That line stuck with me. I was a small-town mechanic, she was the daughter of Hale and Sons Manufacturing, a family that owned half the town. We were opposites. But it didn't matter. Not then. For 6 months, we were inseparable. Breakfasts at the diner. Late drives under the quarry lights. She'd talk about hating her father's expectations, I'd joke about needing to wash oil off before meeting her family. I knew I wasn't their kind, but I thought love was enough. Then came the dinner. I wore my only suit. Their house looked like a courthouse, columns, portraits, a chandelier that cost more than my shop tools. Her mother smiled like she pitied me. Her father, Charles Hale, asked what I did before I'd even sat down. I run a repair shop, I said. He nodded. So you fix cars. The way he said it, like cars, meant garbage. Dinner was polite torture. Questions about revenue, future plans, family background. I could feel Sophie tense beside me. When she left the table to help her mom, I heard him say it, low, dismissive, not even hiding. He'll never be one of us. I froze. The words landed harder than I expected. He didn't even think I could hear him. Sophie drove me home later, apologizing for him. I told her I didn't care. I lied. That sentence burrowed into my skull and stayed there. 2 weeks later, I asked her to marry me anyway. Cheap ring, shaking hands, oil still under my nails. She said yes. For a while, I thought that meant we'd won. Until the engagement dinner. Charles stood to give a toast. It started sweet, talking about Sophie's intelligence, her beauty, her bright future. Then he looked at me. And I suppose we should acknowledge the man she's chosen, he said. Though I can't say I understand it. I always hoped my daughter would marry someone who could carry the family name forward. Someone of equal standing. A few nervous laughs. Mine wasn't one of them. He raised his glass. I'm sure you're a good man, Liam. But good isn't the same as good enough. The room went silent. I felt my face burn, my fists clench under the table. Sophie whispered something to him, but I didn't hear it. I was already standing. I left before dessert. That night, I stared at my ceiling, hearing those words over and over. Not good enough. Sophie came by the next morning, crying, saying she'd leave everything behind for me. And maybe she meant it. But when I asked if she was really ready to cut ties with her family, she hesitated. Just one heartbeat too long. That pause was my answer. I told her goodbye. She cried harder. I didn't. Not because I didn't care, because if I did, I'd never stop. She drove off in the same white car she'd pulled up in the day we met. I watched it disappear down the road and promised myself I'd never chase anyone again. For weeks, I buried myself in work. Days bled into nights. The radio played, the wrench turned, the pain dulled. But that voice, Charles Hale's, never left my head. He'll never be one of us. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd never belong in their world. But someday, I told myself, I'd build one they couldn't ignore. And when they finally looked up, they'd see my name above theirs. I left town the week after Sophie and I ended things. Sold the shop, packed my life into an old Chevy, and drove until the only thing behind me was silence. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay where every gas station clerk and diner waitress looked at me with that same pity, like they'd all heard the story, the mechanic who thought he could marry a Hale. I landed in a mid-sized city 3 hours away and rented a garage the size of a storage unit. My first night there, I slept on the concrete floor beside my tools. I told myself it wasn't rock bottom, it was foundation. Business was slow at first. Then one day, a delivery truck broke down near my place. The driver needed it fixed that day or he'd lose his job. I worked straight through till morning, rebuilt half the transmission, and charged him a fraction of what it was worth. He came back 2 weeks later, with his boss. The boss owned a small construction company with a fleet of trucks that constantly broke down. He liked my work ethic. Hired me to maintain the whole fleet. That's how it started. Within 2 years, I had 6 employees. Within 5, I had a second location. I learned to delegate, to bid on contracts, to negotiate without letting anyone smell desperation. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't care. Every deal, every invoice, every late-night repair felt like one more brick between me and the man who once called me not good enough. By the 7th year, we weren't just fixing trucks. We were manufacturing custom mechanical parts for heavy equipment, the kind used in mining and infrastructure. Then came government contracts, industrial partnerships, and finally, a merger offer from a regional supplier. I didn't just accept it, I restructured it, and became the majority owner. That's how Carter Industries was born. My name on the building. My name on the contracts. My name on the checks. It wasn't about money. It was about silence, the kind that comes when there's nothing left to prove. I didn't date much. Didn't go back home. Didn't check social media. Sophie faded into memory like an old photograph, still there, but blurred around the edges. I told myself I'd moved on. Then one morning, nearly 10 years later, my assistant dropped a folder on my desk. New potential client, she said. They're requesting a partnership proposal. Local manufacturing firm. Old name, but kind of a mess lately. I flipped the folder open. Hale & Sons Manufacturing. I froze. The logo looked smaller than I remembered. My assistant went on, unaware of the knife she'd just twisted. They're requesting a private meeting. The CEO personally reached out. Name's Sophie Hale. It took me a minute to say anything. You're sure? Yeah. She said it's urgent. I leaned back in my chair. For a long moment, all I could do was stare at that name. The same name that once looked down at me across a dinner table. I said, set the meeting. A week later, I was driving back into the town I swore I'd never see again. Everything looked smaller, the gas station, the old garage, even the sky. Or maybe I'd just gotten bigger. Hale & Sons wasn't the proud empire it used to be. The parking lot was half empty. The front gate was rusting. The sign that once gleamed silver now hung crooked, paint flaking off. When I walked inside, I was greeted by a receptionist who looked nervous, as if they weren't used to visitors. She led me to the conference room. And there she was. Sophie. Older, yes, but still unmistakably her. She stood when she saw me, and I caught that flicker of disbelief before she hid it behind a professional smile. Liam, she said softly. It's been a long time. Has it? I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She looked tired, not in the way people get from work, but in the way people get from disappointment. There were faint lines near her eyes, and her hair was tied back like she'd given up caring about perfection. We shook hands like strangers. She opened her laptop and started explaining the situation, how her father's health had declined, how the company was bleeding money, how they needed modern equipment and distribution partners to stay afloat. I let her talk. She didn't know I already knew every word of it. Hale & Sons had been featured in Business Ledger 2 months ago, a nostalgic piece about a once great family company now drowning in debt. They'd refused to adapt, refused to change leadership, refused to listen. Charles Hale's picture was in the article, sitting in a wheelchair, still scowling. I waited until she finished her pitch. Then I said, "You don't recognize the company you're pitching to, do you?" She frowned. "Of course I do. Carter Industries is one of the leading." I slid a document across the table. My company's letterhead. My signature. Her face paled as she read the name again. Carter. Her voice dropped. "You're the owner?" "I am." The silence between us could have cracked glass. I leaned back. 10 years ago, your father told me I'd never be one of you. Looks like I didn't need to be. She swallowed, blinking fast. Liam, I didn't know. I never. I stood up. You don't have to explain. This isn't personal. It's business now. And maybe that was true. Or maybe I just wanted it to sound that way. Before I left, I turned once more. Tell your father I said hello. If he still remembers my name. Driving away, I saw the old Hale mansion through the trees, the same one where I once stood humiliated in a cheap suit. Now, the gate was overgrown, the lights off. For years, I'd imagined this moment, the return, the reckoning, the quiet satisfaction. But it didn't feel the way I thought it would. There was no triumph. Just an ache. Still, part of me knew, the story wasn't over yet. Because something in Sophie's eyes, guilt, regret, or maybe desperation, told me she wasn't done with me. And I wasn't sure if I wanted her to be. A week after that meeting, Sophie called again. I let it ring twice before answering. Liam, she said, her voice calm but frayed at the edges. My father wants to see you. He asked personally. I almost laughed. Your father remembers my name now? A pause. He remembers everything. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to look the man in the eye one last time. Or maybe I just wanted to see what regret looked like on him. The mansion hadn't changed much. Same towering gate, same gravel crunch under my tires. But the place felt smaller now, tired, stripped of its power. Paint peeling on the shutters. One of the garden lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Sophie met me at the door. She looked anxious, like she wasn't sure which version of me had come, the boy she once loved or the man she'd helped break. Inside, the air smelled like old wood and lost pride. Family portraits still lined the hallway, Sophie in her graduation gown, Charles in a suit, shaking hands with men who'd probably stopped taking his calls years ago. We walked into the study. Charles Hale sat by the window in a wheelchair, a blanket over his knees, oxygen tube hooked to his nose. Time had carved deep lines into his face, but the pride in his eyes hadn't aged a day. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice weaker but still sharp. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Didn't think you'd ask," I replied. He smirked. "I didn't. My daughter did. She insists you're our best hope." Sophie stood behind him, silent. Charles coughed, then said, "You've done well for yourself. Impressive rise. A shame it took walking away from my daughter to do it." That hit harder than I expected, but I didn't show it. "You did me a favor, Mr. Hale. You taught me what kind of man I never wanted to be." He chuckled, thin and dry. "Still a mechanic with attitude. Still a man who fixes broken things," I said. "Even when people don't deserve it." The smirk faded. "So you'll help us?" "I haven't decided." He leaned forward, his voice rising. "You think this is about pride? Hundreds of workers depend on this company. You'd let them lose their jobs just to satisfy your ego?" I met his glare. "You lecturing me about ego is the best irony I've heard all year." Sophie finally spoke. "Liam, please. I know what he said back then. I know how wrong it was. But the company's falling apart. People's lives are at stake." I looked at her, the woman who once hesitated to choose me. There was no arrogance now, no family armor. Just exhaustion and something close to fear. "What happened to your banker husband?" I asked quietly. Her eyes flickered. "Divorced. 5 years ago." Charles scoffed. "He was a parasite. I told her not to marry him, but she never listens." That almost made me smile. The hypocrisy of it all. I turned back to her. "Why should I help? You have investors, banks. They've all walked," she said. "Our reputation's damaged. No one trusts us anymore. But they trust you." There it was. The reversal. The same family that once mocked me now needed my name to survive. For a long time, no one spoke. Just the soft hiss of oxygen, the weight of unspoken history pressing down on the room. Finally, I said, "I'll think about it." Charles exhaled through his nose, frustrated. "You'll take pleasure in making me beg, won't you?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out. Sophie followed me to the front steps. The air outside was cool, the sky bruised with sunset. "Liam, wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. "I didn't defend you that night," she said. "At the engagement dinner. I should have. I was scared, of him, of losing everything. But I lost you anyway." I looked back. "You didn't just lose me. You helped prove him right." She nodded, tears threatening. "I know. And I've paid for it every day since." Her honesty cut deeper than her father's insults ever did. "You think helping now makes it right?" I asked. "No," she said softly. "But maybe it's a start." I studied her face, older, tired, but still her. Somewhere deep down, part of me still wanted to believe in the girl who used to bring me coffee at the shop. But life had burned that softness into something sharper. "I'll consider it," I said again. She reached out as if to touch my arm, then thought better of it. "If you walk away this time, the company dies." "Then maybe it's time it does," I said. And I left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I poured a drink, stared out the window of my penthouse, and thought about every mile I'd driven to escape that town. I'd built everything they said I couldn't. Yet standing in that decaying mansion, I didn't feel victorious. Just empty. Helping them meant giving up the satisfaction of seeing them fall. But letting them fail felt like becoming them, cold, self-righteous, proud to the point of cruelty. At 2 in the morning, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "He's getting worse. Please, just come once more. S." I stared at it for a long time. Then I poured another drink. I told myself I didn't care. But deep down, I already knew I'd go. I went back 2 days later. Not because I wanted to, because something in me wouldn't shut up until I did. When I pulled up, the house looked even smaller than before. The Hale mansion wasn't intimidating anymore, it was just a crumbling shell with too much history and not enough love. Sophie met me at the door. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I didn't say I came for you." "I know," she said. "But thank you anyway." Inside, the air was heavy. Charles Hale sat in his chair by the window, frail, pale, but still trying to look powerful. There were medical papers and invoices stacked on the desk beside him. The empire he'd built, reduced to debt and dying pride. He didn't greet me this time. Just gestured toward a chair. I sat. He took off his oxygen tube long enough to say, "I suppose you've come to enjoy the view from above." "I came because your daughter asked." He gave a thin smile. "Always thought she had poor taste." I leaned forward. "You still think you can talk to people like that and get away with it?" He coughed, hard, but kept that faint smirk. Men like me always get away with it. Until we don't. Sophie came in with a folder and set it on the desk between us. This is the offer, she said. I opened it. Their company's assets, liabilities, debt ratio, all of it laid bare. Hale & Sons was collapsing fast. The workers hadn't been paid in 2 months. Machinery leases were expiring. The banks were circling. I closed the folder. You want Carter Industries to buy you out? Charles exhaled. We want a partnership. I looked him dead in the eye. No. You want a bailout? There's a difference. He said nothing. Sophie stepped closer. If you don't take it, the company dies. My father dies knowing he lost everything. The workers lose their jobs. You could save them, Liam. Her voice cracked on my name, and for a moment, I saw the girl who once waited outside my shop at midnight just to hand me coffee. I sighed. You're asking the wrong man to play savior. Then play the businessman, she said. Buy it. Make it yours. Just don't let it disappear. I looked at her for a long time. Then I picked up the pen. I'll do it, I said. But not for you. And not for him. For the people still showing up to work while this place rots from the top down. Her eyes widened. You'll buy it? Yes, I said. Completely. Every share. Every brick. Every inch of this empire. Charles tried to speak, but his voice broke halfway through. You can't. I can, I said quietly. And I will. He glared at me with what little strength he had left. You think this makes you better than me? No, I said. It makes me nothing like you. I signed the contract. Sophie stood frozen. When it was done, I slid the papers across the desk. Congratulations, Mr. Hale. Your company is officially part of Carter Industries. He stared at the signature for a long time, at my name, written in clean black ink where his used to be. His hand trembled as he pushed the papers away. You win, he whispered. No, I said. We all lose when pride runs the show. He didn't answer. Just stared out the window at the gray afternoon. Sophie followed me out to the front steps again. The air smelled like rain. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she said. I didn't either. She hesitated, then asked, do you hate me? I thought about it. About the night I stood in the same driveway, humiliated and heartbroken. About every sleepless night that turned into work, every contract, every dollar that came from proving him wrong. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. I used to. But hate's just another kind of chain. Her eyes softened. Then why help us? I looked back at the mansion. Because I know what it's like to be written off. And because someone needs to remember what this place used to stand for. She nodded slowly. I wish I could take it all back. I know, I said. But we don't get to rewrite history. Just the next chapter. She reached for my hand, not as a plea, not as a gesture of romance, just connection. I let her hold it for a moment before stepping away. Take care of yourself, Sophie, I said. I'll handle the rest. A month later, the deal was complete. Carter Industries absorbed Hale & Sons. The workers kept their jobs. The factory got new machines, new safety measures, fair wages. People called it a business miracle. But I knew better. It wasn't a miracle. It was repair work, the same kind I'd always done, just on a bigger engine. Charles Hale died 3 weeks after the acquisition. Heart failure. At his funeral, Sophie asked me to speak. I declined. Some things didn't need words anymore. When the ceremony ended, I walked through the old factory alone. The machines hummed again, steady and alive. The new nameplate gleamed above the office door. Carter Industries, Hale Division. The foreman handed me the final deed. It's all yours now, boss. I nodded, running my hand across the smooth steel. It hit me then, all the years, all the anger, all the ambition. Everything that started with one sentence, he'll never be one of us. They were right. I never became one of them. I became something better. Before leaving, I shut off the lights and looked back one last time. The floor was quiet except for the steady hum of machines, a sound that always meant something was working again. I smiled. Good enough, I whispered. And I walked out into the rain.